Stand on the south rim of the Grand Canyon and look down. Not at the view, at the problem. The river at the bottom looks like a thread of water running through a wound so deep it creates its own weather. 1 mile down, 277 miles long, up to 18 miles wide, we have been told that thread of water carved this. That given enough time, a river barely wider than a city street produced one of the largest geological features on the surface of the planet. We have been told to accept this because the timescale involved, 6 million years, is long enough that the human mind cannot meaningfully evaluate it. It is long enough that almost any claim becomes plausible simply because nobody can run the experiment. But there are things you can observe right now without any specialized equipment that the official story cannot account for. The walls of the Grand Canyon are vertical, not sloped, not gradually inclined in the way that water erosion produces. Vertical, sheer faces dropping thousands of feet straight down in a geometry that water does not make. Water makes V-shapes. Water makes gradual slopes. Water rounds edges and carves curves. These walls look cut. And the layers exposed in those walls, dozens of distinct sedimentary bands in different colors and different compositions, maintain perfect horizontal alignment for the entire 277-mile length of the canyon, without warping, without mixing, without the degradation at boundaries that actual geological time would produce. Then there is the question of where the rock went. 1,000 cubic miles of missing material. More than 10 trillion tons of stone that the official story says was carried away grain by a river that cannot today move enough sediment in a year to account for it in any timeline that makes mathematical sense. The rock is not downstream. It is right there, spread across the desert floor in every direction. Angular, sharp-edged, crushed, waiting for someone to look at it and ask the question it has been sitting there asking for 2 centuries. What actually happened here, before the canyons, look at what surrounds them. Because the first problem with the official story is not the formations themselves. It is the debris. When you mine something on an industrial scale, you do not just extract material. You leave waste, mountains of it. Walk through any desert in Arizona, New Mexico, or southern Utah and ask yourself what you are actually looking at. Sand, gravel. Millions of tons of crushed rock and sediment stretching to every horizon in every direction as far as you can see. We call it desert. We assume it is natural. We have been told it is the product of gradual erosion across geological time. But natural erosion does not create uniform debris fields, it creates riverbeds. It creates alluvial fans and gradual slopes, and the specific depositional patterns that running water leaves behind when it moves sediment from one place to another. What you see in the American Southwest is not that. It is chunked and piled, and in some areas sorted by size, and in other areas completely mixed in a way that has no consistent geological explanation under the standard model. It looks like tailings. It looks exactly like the waste material you see adjacent to any modern quarry or mining operation, the crushed byproduct of extracting what was wanted and leaving behind what was not. Except this waste does not cover a quarry site, it covers entire states. Pick up a handful of that desert sand and look at it closely. The grains are angular, sharp-edged, irregular. These particles have not been worn smooth by water moving them across surfaces over millions of years. They have been fractured. Crushed, pulverized by mechanical force. When nature erodes rock gradually, the particles become rounded. When rock is crushed in an industrial process, the fragments are angular. The desert floor of the American Southwest is covered in angular fragments. That is not what gradual erosion leaves behind. Monument Valley is one of the most photographed landscapes on Earth. The image of those massive sandstone buttes rising from a flat red desert floor is so familiar it has become a visual shorthand for a certain idea of the American West. We have looked at it 10,000 times. And almost nobody has asked the question that the geometry of what they are looking at demands. The buttes are evenly spaced, not approximately evenly spaced in the loose way that random erosion might accidentally produce. Evenly spaced with a consistency that measurements confirm. Roughly 800 to 1,200 feet apart in most cases across the valley floor, they rise at similar angles. Their faces in many places are vertical or near vertical, dropping straight down for hundreds of feet in smooth faces that natural weathering does not produce. And the floor between them is flat, perfectly level for miles in every direction. The official story is that these buttes are what is left after millions of years of erosion removed everything else, that they are the hardest remnants of an ancient plateau that water and wind slowly stripped away until only the most resistant formations remained. But if water removed the plateau, where did the water go? There is no river system in the region large enough to have moved the volume of material the official explanation requires. The Colorado River could not have done it. No tributary network visible today could have done it. And the geometry of what remains does not match what water erosion leaves behind. It matches something else. When industrial mining operations excavate underground, they do not remove everything. They leave pillars, columns of unmined material spaced at regular intervals to support the overhead structure and prevent collapse. You leave them every few hundred feet. You keep the spacing consistent. You maintain the structural integrity of what is above you while you extract what is below. Monument Valley looks like the floor of an operation where the pillars were left standing and everything else was removed. The buttes are the pillars. The flat desert floor is the excavated surface. And the angular crushed material covering that floor is what was left behind when the extraction was complete. The Grand Canyon contains approximately 1,000 cubic miles of missing rock. Work through what that means in physical terms. 1,000 cubic miles of predominantly sedimentary rock, at an average density of approximately 2.5 grams per cubic centimeter, gives you somewhere in the range of 10 trillion tons of material that was once in that canyon and is no longer there. The Colorado River moves approximately 500,000 tons of sediment per year under modern flow conditions. If you assume the river ran at 10 times its modern sediment load during hypothetical peak flow periods across its history, which is a generous assumption with limited geological support, the river could have moved roughly 5 million tons of material per year. At that rate, moving 10 trillion tons of material would require 2 million years of continuous operation at peak capacity. The official timeline says the canyon formed over 6 million years, which sounds like it provides the necessary margin. But the problem is not the timeline. The problem is where the sediment went. If the Colorado River moved 10 trillion tons of material out of the Grand Canyon over millions of years, that material had to go somewhere. It would be downstream. It would be in the river delta. It would be in the sediment deposits along the river's course all the way to the Gulf of California. The downstream deposits are not there at the scale the math requires. The delta at the river's mouth does not contain enough material. The sediment record along the river's course does not account for the volume. The rock is not where the river would have put it if the river moved it. The rock is right there on the desert floor surrounding the canyon in every direction. Angular, crushed, the specific physical signature of material that was broken by force and left where it fell. The American Southwest is not the only place where this pattern appears. Once you know what to look for, it appears on every continent. The Atacama Desert in Chile is flanked by valleys with geometries that have no conventional geological explanation. Sections of those valleys are perfectly straight for miles. Their walls drop vertically for hundreds of feet. There is almost no water in the Atacama. Some areas have not recorded measurable rainfall in over 400 years. There is no river system capable of producing the vertical wall geometries visible in those valleys under any flow conditions. The Val de la Luna shows sharp 90-degree corners where the valley changes direction, the kind of geometry that appears in quarries and nowhere in natural canyon systems. And in certain areas of the Atacama, gravel deposits are sorted by color. Red material in one zone, white in another, gray in a third. Natural processes do not sort material by color. Wind does not do it. Water does not do it. Industrial separation processes do. The same features appear in the Sahara. In the Australian outback, in the Gobi Desert of Mongolia, vast flat surfaces covered in angular crushed material sitting adjacent to formations with vertical faces and geometries inconsistent with the erosion processes officially credited with producing them. These are not isolated anomalies distributed randomly across the planet. They form a pattern. A global pattern of debris fields and excavated formations that share specific geometric and material characteristics, regardless of the continent they are on or the climate they exist within. The question the pattern asks is the same question the Grand Canyon asks. What process produced all of this? And where did the civilization go that ran it? Advanced civilizations do not excavate for the sake of excavating. Industrial operations exist because something being extracted has sufficient value to justify the effort and the infrastructure required to extract it. The scale of what the physical evidence in the American Southwest suggests, and in the Atacama and the Sahara and the Gobi, is not the scale of a local mining operation extracting a specific mineral deposit. It is the scale of a civilization extracting raw materials across an entire continent. Stone for construction. Metal ore for tools and infrastructure. Minerals for processes we may no longer understand. Possibly energy sources whose nature the official record has never acknowledged. The Tartarian Framework. The body of alternative history research examining evidence of a global advanced civilization that operated before the 19th century and was systematically erased from the official historical record, holds that the built environment we see attributed to the 18th and early 19th centuries reflects a level of material mastery and engineering ambition that the construction methods and labor forces the official history describes could not have produced. Buildings with foundations descending 40 and 50 feet below current street level. Road and aqueduct networks spanning thousands of miles, grand civic architecture appearing simultaneously across multiple continents in a design tradition that requires centuries of shared development to produce. If the civilization that built those things was real, and if its engineering capability was what the physical evidence suggests, then the desert Southwest is not a mystery. It is an expected consequence. A civilization that can build at that scale needs to extract at that scale, and when it extracts at that scale, it reshapes landscapes. It leaves debris fields the size of states. It carves features into the earth that the civilization that comes after, lacking the context to understand what it is looking at, attributes to millions of years of natural process, because the alternative requires accepting something the official story has been constructed specifically to prevent. Something ended the operation. The evidence for a catastrophic transition event in the relatively recent past, recent in the sense of centuries rather than geological epochs, comes from multiple independent directions. The mud flood hypothesis, which researchers examining the built environment of European and American cities have developed from the physical evidence of buildings with ground floors below current street level, windows designed to look out at grade that now look out at earth, entrance doors that open onto buried stairways, proposes that a significant depositional event buried the lower levels of inhabited structures across a geographic range, suggesting a global event rather than local subsidence. If a catastrophic sediment event occurred, it would explain the debris fields. It would explain the sudden silting over of what had been operational infrastructure. It would explain why the historical record appears to start clean in the mid-19th century, with very little coherent documentation of the civilization that preceded it. The timeline fits. The physical evidence in the built environment fits. And the scale of the desert debris fields, which the official story requires millions of years to explain, fits if the material was deposited rapidly in the aftermath of a catastrophic event rather than gradually over geological time. What the reset did not erase is the physical record. The tailings are still there. The canyon walls are still vertical. The buttes are still evenly spaced at the intervals you would expect if they were support pillars rather than erosional remnants. The angular crushed material is still on the desert floor, with the grain signature of mechanical pulverization rather than natural weathering. The evidence was not hidden, it was relabeled. It was given a new explanation that required a timescale too long for anyone to evaluate empirically. And that relabeling has held for 2 centuries, because the institutions that control the official account of the past have strong structural reasons to maintain it. The standard geological explanation for the American Southwest landscape has 3 problems that it has never adequately resolved. The first is the geometry. Water erosion produces specific shapes: V-shaped valleys, gradually inclined slopes, rounded edges, weathered irregular surfaces. The Grand Canyon has vertical walls. Monument Valley has vertical buttes with flat tops. The Atacama valleys have right-angle corners. These geometries do not appear in any water erosion system anywhere on Earth operating under any flow conditions. They appear in cut material, in quarried surfaces, in excavations. The second problem is the sediment budget. The volume of material missing from the Grand Canyon alone exceeds what the Colorado River could have transporting in the entire official formation timeline by orders of magnitude under any reasonable assumption about historical flow rates. The downstream record does not contain the material. The delta does not contain it. Material is on the desert floor adjacent to and surrounding the canyon in the form of angular crushed particles, with the mechanical signature of forced fragmentation rather than natural erosion. The third problem is the sorting. Areas of the Atacama and other desert regions show material sorted by color and composition in patterns that no natural process produces. Wind and water do not sort material by mineral composition across miles of terrain. Industrial separation processes do. The official explanation has not resolved any of these 3 problems. It has existed alongside them for long enough that the problems have become normalized. They appear in scientific literature as anomalies requiring further study. They have been requiring further study for decades. The study that would resolve them would require asking a question that the official framework is not structured to ask. Go to the Grand Canyon. Walk out to the rim. Look at the vertical walls. Look at the perfectly horizontal layers maintaining their alignment for 277 miles without the degradation or mixing that actual geological time imprints on rock boundaries. Ask yourself what cut those walls that cleanly. Ask yourself where the 10 trillion tons of missing rock went and why it is not where the river would have put it. Then walk into the desert, pick up a handful of sand, look at the individual grains. They are angular, sharp-edged. Fractured by force rather than rounded by water. This is not what millions of years of natural erosion produces. This is what mechanical pulverization produces. You have been walking on industrial waste your entire life and been told it was scenery. The canyons are still there. The geometry has not changed. The sediment budget still does not reconcile. The angular grain signature is still in the sand under your feet, waiting for anyone willing to pick it up and look at it, directly without the filter of an explanation that was constructed to make sure you would not recognize what you were holding. We did not climb steadily from primitive origins to our current level of technological capability. The physical evidence in the landscape suggests something different. It suggests a civilization that operated at a scale of extraction and engineering that our current capabilities cannot match, that it operated recently enough that its debris is still on the surface of the Earth rather than buried in geological strata, and that what ended it also ended the knowledge of what it was. The desert does not lie. It does not require institutional authorization to be read. It just requires someone willing to stand in it and ask what they are actually looking at rather than accepting the explanation they were given before they were old enough to question it. The tailings are still there. The pillars are still standing. The canyon walls are still vertical. And the question is still waiting for the answer that the official record was specifically designed to prevent anyone from finding.